Welcome to the debate. So I want you to imagine sitting at your kitchen table on, a random Tuesday. Your phone buzzes. You look down and the caller ID displays an official police insignia.
Right, a totally normal day, suddenly terrifying.
Exactly. You answer and this very stern voice informs you that a package containing illegal contraband has been intercepted in your name. They say there's a warrant out for your arrest, and this is key. You are absolutely forbidden from hanging up the phone.
Yeah, and over the next few hours, through this relentless campaign of psychological terror, really, you are coerced into liquidating your entire life savings just to, quote-unquote, clear your name.
Right. And if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, well, I would never fall for a fake police badge. But, you have to understand the psychological pressure cooker these syndicates put people in. This is the terrifying reality of a digital arrest scam.
And it is an incredibly lucrative reality, too. These are highly sophisticated frads where malicious actors essentially impersonate the state. They completely paralyze victims with the fear of imminent imprisonment. And, by the time the victim realizes they aren't actually talking to law enforcement, well, the money is just gone.
It's gone, yeah. It reminds me of when a biological virus first breaches our natural defenses. The immediate damage isn't actually inflicted by the virus itself, right? The true danger lies in the pathogen's ability to mimic healthy cells.
It bypasses the checkpoints.
Systems' inherent trust and turns our own biology against us. And that is exactly what these scammers are doing to our digital infrastructure. But today, we are examining what appears to be a massive systemic counterattack.
A very newly documented one, yes?
Right. So the Ministry of Home Affairs, operating through the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, which is often referred to as I4C, the central node for tracking these cyber threats, has just submitted this comprehensive status report to the Supreme Court. It details an unprecedented, multi-agency crackdown on these exact digital arrest syndicates.
And the scale of the response outlined in this report is, well, it's certainly massive. We're looking at sweeping measures that involve the Reserve Bank of India, the Central Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Telecommunications, MIDI, and major private tech companies.
They're all at the table.
They are. They are all seemingly pulling in the same direction now. For instance, just since January 2026, WhatsApp alone has banned approximately 9,400 accounts directly linked to these specific scams.
Which brings us to the core question we are debating today. Is this unprecedented, coordinated technological and regulatory dragnet the definitive, structural solution to eradicating digital arrest scams? Because I argue that it is. I'll be taking the stance that the integration of platform-level safety features, immediate telecom blocking, and coordinated financial freezing represents a robust systemic defense.
And I'll be taking the opposing view. While the scale of these agencies working together is undeniably impressive, I argue that these measures are fundamentally reactionary thresholds. They're visual band-aids, really.
Band-aids?
Yes, band-aids. Sophisticated fraud networks will easily circumvent these roadblocks. We're looking at a framework that merely addresses the symptoms of the fraud, while leaving the underlying mechanics entirely intact. So I argue it fails to neutralize the core threat.
Well, I view this as a comprehensive digital immune response. Just as a biological immune system relies on different cells to identify, isolate, and destroy a pathogen, this multi-agency response uses platforms like WhatsApp as the first responder to identify the threat. Then the telecom department acts as the isolation mechanism, and federal investigators are the specialized T cells attacking the root infection.
I come at it from a very different way.
Let's unpack that, starting with the platform-level interventions. Because, I see this as a historic turning point in cyber defense. The sheer scale and speed of these actions really cannot be overstated.
You mean the WhatsApp account bans?
Yeah, banning 9,400 accounts in just a few months following a special investigation prompted by government agencies. That shows a level of public-private coordination we just haven't seen before. But more importantly, tackling this issue requires choking off the avenues of deception.
How so?
Well, how does a digital arrest start? With an illusion, right? So WhatsApp is planning vital new safety features, specifically alerting users to calls from newly created accounts and automatically hiding profile pictures that utilize police or government logos. The ecosystem is directly neutralizing the psychological manipulation here.
Right, the logo issue.
The entire scam hinges on the illusion of authority. If you strip away that visual anchor of a police badge on the caller ID, the amygdala doesn't get hijacked, the panic doesn't set in, and the whole digital arrest falls apart.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
This entire approach is fundamentally an exercise in playing catch-up. Pointing to 9,400 banned accounts as a victory is a serious mischaracterization of the threat landscape. I mean, think about it. How does WhatsApp know to ban an account in the first place?
Usually through user reports or algorithmic flagging.
Exactly. Usually user reports and post-incident telemetry. That means banning 9,400 accounts implies that thousands of successful or at least attempted frauds have already occurred. The damage was done before the ban hammer ever fell.
I see why you think that, but isn't all law enforcement inherently reactive at first? You have to identify the crime before you can stop it. If we strip away their primary tool of intimidation, which is that visual cue of a police logo, don't we exponentially increase the friction required to execute the scam? We are making it fundamentally harder for them to operate.
Friction, yes. I'll grant you friction, but not prevention. And relying on, suspicious caller triggers or hiding government logos assumes we're dealing with a static adversary.
Which they aren't, obviously.
Right. It assumes scammers won't simply adapt their social engineering tactics. If they can't use a police logo, they will just pivot. They will pose as bank compliance officers investigating a fraudulent charge using a generic corporate logo. Or, to bypass the newly created account warning you mentioned, they'll simply purchase aged, established accounts on the black market.
Ah, the account farming issue.
Yes. These are accounts that look perfectly normal to the platform's algorithm. You are treating the symptom, the visual logo, not the disease, which is the vulnerability of the communication channel itself. You're basically forcing them to write a new script, not forcing them out of the theater.
Okay, but if they change the script, they still need the physical phone line to deliver it to the victim. And I think that organically shifts our debate from platform-level visual blocks to the underlying infrastructure, right? How the telecom networks are handling the actual connections.
Yes, let's talk about the telecom networks.
This is where the Department of Telecommunications, or DOT, is implementing what I think is a critical new system. It's designed to block suspicious SIM cards within 2 to 3 hours of identification. Look at what the telecom companies are actually doing here. They're shutting down the connection almost instantly once it's flagged.
Instant is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Well, a rapid response window severely limits the operational lifespan of a scammer's toolkit. If a SIM card is burned within hours, you cut off the attack before it can be scaled up. You are actively disrupting their logistical supply chain.
That sounds highly effective on paper, I'll admit. But we have to ground this in operational reality. Map that 2 to 3 hour window onto the actual lived experience of a victim.
Okay.
The crucial phrase in the report is 2 to 3 hours of identification. That is a massive, massive caveat. A digital arrest scam relies on immediate, intense pressure. In minute 1, the victim receives the call. By minute 30, they are isolated in a room, forbidden from talking to their spouse or anyone else.
Right, the isolation phase.
Yes. And by minute 60, the critical damage occurs. The victim is coerced into liquidating a fixed deposit or wiring their life savings through an RTGS bank transfer, which is a real-time gross settlement. It means the money clears and vanishes instantly.
Instantly.
Right. By minute 90, that money's been laundered through a dozen crypto wallets. So a 3-hour post-identification block, that is an absolute lifetime in the context of a live cyber fraud. By the time the DOT flips the switch on that SIM card, the house is already burned down, the victim's life savings are gone.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it very differently. Let's look at the broader mechanics of the fraud network. Yes, the immediate victim might be caught in that initial window. We acknowledge that. But these syndicates operate on volume. A single operator might try to call 50 people a day.
Sure.
Doesn't burning this SIM card within 3 hours prevent the next 49 victims that same day? You are effectively destroying their return on investment. They paid for a connection, and you are taking it away before they can make it profitable.
It's a compelling argument, but have you considered the cost asymmetry here? How do scammers actually get these SIM cards in the first place?
Usually through stolen identities or mules.
Exactly. They use mules, people desperate enough to sell their identity documents for a few hundred rupees to bypass KYC regulations, the Know Your Customer rules. Because of this, illicit SIM cards are incredibly cheap. They are entirely disposable commodities.
But there's still a cost.
A negligible one. On the flip side, the return on investment for a successful digital arrest is astronomically high. We are talking about yields of tens of lakhs, sometimes crores, from a single victim. So burning a SIM card after 3 hours is just an accepted cost of doing business for the syndicate. They don't care if the SIM is deactivated after one successful hit.
You think they just write it off?
Absolutely. They simply open a desk drawer and insert the next one from their stockpile of thousands. The 2 to 3 hour window does not destroy their economic model at all. It just forces them to cycle through their cheap inventory slightly faster.
But that logic assumes the syndicate actually gets to keep the money, which brings us to the financial and investigative heavy hitters involved in this crackdown. If SIM cards are cheap, the money they steal is what actually matters, right?
Right, the financial layer.
The strategy isn't just about cutting off communication. It's about following the funds and prosecuting the masterminds. The Reserve Bank of India has prepared new standard operating procedures for banks to immediately freeze suspicious accounts linked to cyber frauds.
Which is a necessary step, yes.
And working in tandem with this financial freeze, the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, is taking over major digital arrest investigations. The status report highlights a specific Delhi case involving the cheating of 22.92 crore rupees.
I read about that case.
Yeah, that is definitive proof that the CBI is successfully targeting the massive systemic nodes of these networks. They are dismantling the exact financial infrastructure that makes the rapid cycling of SIM cards profitable in the first place.
We really have to look at the specific parameters of that CBI involvement, though, because it reveals a deeply problematic structural flaw in how we approach cyber justice right now.
A structural flaw? How so?
The report explicitly states that the CBI has fixed a 10 crore rupee fraud threshold for taking over digital arrest investigations. I argue this threshold creates a deeply inequitable two-tiered justice system.
Okay, explain what you mean by two-tiered.
By only re-registering and taking over major cases above 10 crore, what happens to the vast majority of victims? The everyday citizen who loses 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, or even 50 lakhs, their entire retirement fund, falls far below that federal threshold. Well, local police handle those. Yes, their cases are left fragmented across local police jurisdictions, and local police, despite their absolute best efforts, often lack the interstate reach and technical sophistication to pursue transnational cyber syndicates. The CBI is only hunting the whales, leaving the daily victims to fend for themselves in this decentralized investigative maze.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, because, you don't send a tactical federal unit to stop a single pickpocket.
A pickpocket? That's a bit reductive.
Hear me out. By setting a 10 crore threshold, the CBI is acting as a strategic strike force aimed at decapitating the syndicate heads, like the ones orchestrating that 22.92 crore Delhi case. How does taking down a kingpin work? It ultimately stops hundreds of foot soldiers from operating.
If they operate like a traditional mafia, sure.
Right. You have to allocate your premier investigative resources where they can do the most structural damage to the network. Local police can handle the localized symptoms and file the initial reports, but the CBI connects the dots to dismantle the overarching infrastructure.
But these aren't isolated pickpockets, and they aren't traditional top-down mafias. They are highly distributed, deeply integrated networks. Cyber syndicates use a technique very similar to financial smurfing.
Smurfing?
Yes. Structuring deposits. A syndicate might steal 50 crores over a year, but they do it in increments of 5 lakhs across thousands of victims spread out over 20 different states. If the CBI is only looking for single FIRs, first information reports, or tightly clustered cases that cross the 10 crore mark in one go, they are fundamentally misinterpreting the aggregated nature of modern cyber fraud.
But surely the CBI aggregates data too.
Not effectively enough. If the threshold is set per investigation, a sophisticated syndicate can intentionally structure their operations to ensure individual losses never trigger that federal intervention threshold. They effectively immunize themselves from the CBI's strategic strike force by keeping the individual theft amounts relatively low. They know the local jurisdictions won't be able to piece the puzzle together across state lines.
I disagree that they can easily immunize themselves, especially when we look at the ultimate fix planned for the underlying infrastructure. If the issue is that local police can't track anonymous scammers across state lines, then the solution is to permanently eradicate the anonymity.
The anonymity is the core of the issue, yes.
And that is exactly what the government is building. We are moving from these current investigative thresholds to a planned future architecture designed to permanently solve the root issue of identity. Officials noted in the report that a biometric identity verification system for real-time SIM monitoring is being planned.
Right, the December 2026 mandate?
Yes, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has mandated its implementation by December 2026. This elevates the entire defense strategy in a way we haven't seen.
But how exactly is that going to work in practice?
It works by tying real-time biometric verification, like a live thumbprint or a facial scan, to active SIM usage. Right now, as you pointed out earlier, scammers use mules to bypass HIPAA KYC regulations They buy a SIM with a stolen ID.
Yes.
But with a real-time biometric grid, the network continuously verifies that the person physically operating the phone is the actual registered owner. The veil of anonymity that emboldens cybercriminals is completely eradicated. You simply cannot operate a sprawling digital arrest syndicate, burning through hundreds of SIM cards a week, if every single communication node requires real-time, undeniable physical proof of identity. The mule loophole is just closed.
I deeply question the reliance on a future technological silver bullet. First, we just have to acknowledge the temporal reality here. We are currently in April 2026. Waiting until December for this biometric grid to come online leaves an 8-month open season.
It's a massive infrastructure project. It takes time.
But that is 8 months for scammers to not only continue their operations, but to aggressively accelerate them before the door supposedly closes. That's 8 months of devastating financial losses for everyday people. Furthermore, can real-time SIM monitoring truly stop a digital scam?
Why wouldn't it?
Because scammers are highly adaptable. If you tighten SIM regulations to the point of extreme biometric friction, they aren't just going to give up and get day jobs. They will abandon traditional telecom infrastructure entirely.
So how would they even reach the victims?
They will route their communications through decentralized internet protocols. They will use commercial VPNs to mask their locations or utilize satellite internet uplinks that operate entirely outside the jurisdiction and technical reach of the Department of Telecommunications. The biometric grid will perfectly secure a legacy telecom system that the sophisticated scammers have simply stopped using. We are building a fortress around an empty castle.
I see your concern regarding the timeline, but let me give you a slightly different perspective on that. An 8-month rollout for a nationwide, real-time biometric grid spanning hundreds of millions of users is incredibly fast for state infrastructure.
Fast for the state, maybe?
Isn't it intellectually uncharitable to dismiss a permanent architectural fix simply because it takes a few months to build? I mean, we are talking about fundamentally altering how digital identity works to protect citizens.
It is not uncharitable. It is a clear-eyed recognition of the adversary's agility. 8 months in the technology sector is an absolute eternity. By the time this biometric grid is fully operational in December, the scam won't look like a digital arrest over a WhatsApp call linked to a local prepaid SIM.
You think it'll be completely different?
I know it will. It will be an AI-driven deepfake orchestrated through a decentralized network. The scammer won't just have a police logo on your screen. They will have a live, AI-generated video feed of a real police chief speaking directly to you. My core argument remains. The current regulatory dragnet, from WhatsApp banning accounts to the DOT blocking SIMs to the CBI setting financial thresholds, is fundamentally focused on how the crime was committed yesterday, not how it will be committed tomorrow.
But by dismantling the infrastructure of yesterday, we are forcing them out of the most accessible, high-conversion channels. They have to spend money and time developing those decentralized systems, which heavily raises their barrier to entry.
It does raise the barrier, but it doesn't stop the crime.
Well, when we summarize a discourse today, I think we are looking at two distinct interpretations of this Supreme Court status report. From my perspective, we are witnessing an unprecedented, deeply integrated web of defense. WhatsApp is stripping away the visual illusion of authority and banning malicious accounts. The telecom department is implementing rapid SIM blocking to disrupt their logistical supply chain. And the CBI, backed by the RBI's financial freezing protocols, is stepping in to hunt the massive syndicates that fund these operations. To me, it really is a comprehensive structural response.
And from my perspective, while getting these different agencies in the same room is undoubtedly a step forward, the outputs remain flawed, reactive measures. They suffer from dangerous time lags, such as that 2 to 3 hour window that leaves the immediate victims completely vulnerable during the most critical moments of the extortion.
Right.
They rely on high, 10-crore intervention thresholds that effectively abandon everyday citizens to under-resourced local police departments, and they place far too much faith in technological triggers, like hiding logos or future biometric grids, that sophisticated, highly motivated criminal networks will invariably bypass or outmaneuver by moving to entirely different platforms.
Yet, despite all of that, I think it is important to acknowledge our points of convergence here. We both agree that the sheer coordination between MEITI, I4C, the DOT, the RBI, and private tech companies is an essential evolution.
Unquestionably.
For years, siloed approaches have failed miserably against cyber fraud. Law enforcement wasn't talking to the banks weren't talking to the telecoms, and the victims just fell through the cracks. This report clearly demonstrates that the government and private sector recognize that isolated defenses are no longer viable.
Absolutely. The recognition that financial regulators, telecommunications providers, and law enforcement must share real-time data is definitely the most valuable takeaway from this initiative. The structural intent is exactly right, even if I remain highly skeptical of the specific operational executions and the timelines. You simply cannot fight a networked adversary with a fragmented defense.
Which leaves us with a critical, lingering question. Will the December 2026 biometric rollout finally close the loop on digital arrests, permanently eradicating the anonymity these networks rely on? Or, as you strongly suggest, are we simply forcing scammers to evolve into an even more sophisticated paradigm of fraud, pushing them deeper into the decentralized web?
That is the perpetual arms race of cybersecurity, isn't it? Every definitive wall we build simply creates the evolutionary pressure for the adversary to design a better ladder.
Very true. Examining these regulatory frameworks through multiple lenses is essential. There is so much more to explore in the evolving landscape of digital security and the source material we've discussed today. We leave it to you, our listeners, to weigh the evidence for yourselves. Perhaps the true measure of these reforms isn't whether they catch every scammer today, but whether they make the cost of running a digital arrest network tomorrow fundamentally unsustainable.